The recording has started.
There you go. It's good to know that my tech work has worked.
Oh, I can see the numbers are wrapping up. 13 people so far.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Let us know where you're joining us from, what company you work at. Please be active in the chat. Let us know if you'll come from anywhere sunny. If it's somewhere sunny, happy to live vicariously through you, because unfortunately it is not sunny at all over here. We're just going to wait for a couple of minutes to allow more people to join us. And just to let you know, we are recording this session. So if you know anyone who wasn't able to make it today, you can just let them know not to be disheartened. We will be sharing a copy of this webinar, not today, likely later this week. I don't want to put too much pressure on the rest of the team to do the editing. We will share it with you later this week.
Or maybe next week.
Or maybe next week. Apparently, I am putting way too much pressure already. Hope everyone's had time to grab a coffee, a warm jumper. I'm in a turtleneck to keep myself toasty. Now is your opportunity to do a last minute run to grab a coffee. Oh, I can see Shazia. Hey, Shazia.
Hey, Shazia. Hi, Ali. Oh, Julie. And Melvin.
Hey, Anne. We're now up to 26 people. I assume that's including us as well. 27, 28. I think maybe we can start now. We've now hit 102 and we don't want to cut into too much of the webinar time. So now that we can begin, I just want to start by saying good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for CORE's Black History Month webinar. Our theme for this webinar is sharing your personal experience and reflections with a focus on this year's theme, Black Sisterhood. We thought scheduling the webinar for the last day of October would be a great way to wrap up the month. We have quite a few topics up for discussion for the next hour, so please be engaged. I have the honor of moderating this webinar. My name is Franklin Yatsambo, and I've been in the research industry for 5 years now, which has kind of flown by. In my day job, I'm a technical project manager at Ipsos, and I'm also part of the CORE steering committee. Now, today would not be possible without our 5 wonderful speakers. Now, I don't think I can do them enough justice, so I'd like to ask our speakers to please unmute yourselves, and in no particular order, please introduce yourselves to our listeners. Shar, you're already unmuted. Would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Hi, I'm Charlene Adamah. I'm also a part of the Colour of Research team. I'm one of the co-founders there. And in my day-to-day, I work at Q2Q Global. And I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Shar.
Hey, I'm Lesa. I'm Lesa Ali. I've worked in research for the last 12 years. I currently work as a research manager at Bupa, but I also am a founder of a company called Ali Educational Consultancy. I'm a wife and a mother. I'm from the Caribbean, that's my heritage, and I'm really honored to be part of this panel today to join this discussion. So thank you for having me.
Well, I'll go next then. So, afternoon, everybody. I'm Shari Leigh. I'm the founder of Black Business Network. We're an online community for Black entrepreneurs, and we also lead on the research with Savanta and Lloyd's Bank called Black British in Business and Proud.
Thanks, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm Anita Kelly-Metelewa. I'm the Managing Director of FieldworkHub. I've been in and out of research for probably about 12 to 15 years now. And I can't ever introduce myself without saying that I'm a mum of two little humans who bring me joy and challenge in equal measure. But I'm really happy to be here. I'm really looking forward to an exciting discussion over the next hour.
Which I think leaves me. So hello everybody, welcome, thank you for coming. It's an absolute pleasure that Core asked me to come along today. My name is Nick Baker. I'm the Chief Research Officer at Savanta, and formerly to the chair of the MRS, and so been involved with things around, you know, what Core have been doing in the periphery for quite a while. But I think it's an absolute pleasure to be here because it's a wonderfully important topic that we're going to talk about today.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves and for sharing your volunteering your time and your willingness to share your lived experiences with us. Now, before one part of the webinar, and then I'll give you a brief introduction into our topic. So on the housekeeping side, please to all of our attendees, please feel free to share any of your questions in the Q&A portion of the chat. We're setting aside 10 minutes at the end of the, well, after the questions, to go through the Q&A portion of the session. And please don't be disheartened if we don't have enough time to go through each and every single one of your questions. We're happy to follow up with you after the webinar. So why are we here? What is Black History Month? Well, Black History Month is not a holiday, so you don't want to be saying to someone, Happy Black History Month. You don't get a day off, I've checked. In essence, it's a way to honor and celebrate the contributions of Black people within not just the UK, but globally. It gives us an opportunity to share our collective history, because Black history is not just synonymous to just Black people. It's intricate to the history of this country as a whole. So where did Black History Month originate? Well, it originated in 1926 in the US. It was the brainchild of Carter G. Woodson, and it wasn't formally recognized as a Black History Month until 1970, and then it wasn't recognized nationwide until 1976. And then across the pond in the UK, it was established by a Ghanaian-born activist, Akiaba Adesebo, in 1987, who worked for Greater London Council. Now, in the UK, we honor the month in October to give an opportunity to kids who, when they're coming back from their summer holidays, gives an opportunity to learn more about Black history and culture. In the US, it's honored in February. This is to honor the birthdays of abolitionist Frederick Douglass and President Abraham Lincoln. Right, now this leads us very nicely into our first question to open up our discussion. What does Black History Month mean to you? And Lesa, would you like to open up our discussion?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in the Caribbean, so I think when I was younger, Black history wasn't a thing. It was just history. It was just my history. But I think over the last few years, I've realized that was very limited. My knowledge was very limited to Caribbean history, not sort of Black history and what that really meant. I see it as a time to really kind of raise awareness of still some of the challenges that we face today, but more so I see it as a time to celebrate the achievements of those that have paved the way in pretty much every field of life that I can think about, that allows this generation of Black people to do things that our ancestors could only really dream of. So that's kind of what it means to me.
And I'll pose the same question to you, Nick. What does Black History Month mean to you?
So for me, it's an opportunity to learn more than anything else. Yeah, I think that in order that you can really engage with like the realities of what's happened, right? You need to be able to understand stuff which basically whether it's the media or just like the inertia of kind of the narrative that we've learned. I mean, I'm 49, yeah, and last year, I remember reading loads about Arthur Wharton, right, which I knew nothing about that, and I found that really inspiring because his stories have been written out of history to a degree, yeah, or to a large degree, to be honest with you. And for me, Black History Month creates this opportunity for ears to be listening more than they would be, the rest of the time, yeah, and an opportunity to really engage and learn with things in a way that is, for me, vital for change that is happening, but too slowly, but for that to continue, because without the understanding, that can never happen.
And Anita, I'd be interested to hear from your perspective. I know you work very closely to your local school governing board. I'd be interested to hear from your perspective. What does Black History Month mean to you?
I couldn't agree more with Lesa and Nick. I think it's really a time to reflect. It's time to teach and educate others. It's a time to also educate ourselves. Nick's absolutely right. It's very difficult to teach if you don't really have a good understanding of things. So I think it's time to really understand the contributions of lots of phenomenal, amazing, incredible Black people and their contribution to society. We couldn't live in the world that we live in without the contribution of some of these great men and women. So it's a really good opportunity to stop, take a step back and really reflect on their contributions.
And Shari, I'd like to ask you, what would you say from your perspective is the significance of Black History Month?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of follows on from what everybody's saying. I guess for me personally, I've never necessarily seen it as something that is just for the Black community. I personally like to always think of it, I always try to expand my knowledge and understanding of Black history. That was a transition for me in my life. And then a few years ago, I made it my business to constantly be trying to understand what our history is, where we come from, and how that interlinks into the world that we see today. And so when Black History Month rolls around, while I guess I don't ever see it as something that's significant to me, I see it as a significant opportunity for others to really build understanding and kind of learning of what Black history is and kind of how that intertwines into what is just all of our history, right? Particularly here in the UK, where I always see Black history as something that's so intertwined with British history itself. So I really see this month as an opportunity for others to kind of take on a kind of opportunity to really kind of learn about Black history and the contributions that it's made to the world that we see today.
And Shah, would you like to answer the same question? What would you say, in your opinion, is the significance of Black History Month?
Yeah, I think everyone sort of has touched on a lot of my feelings. And I guess the only other thing that I would probably add is that personally, I think it's a good opportunity for people to realign and think about the following year going forward, and it not just being this 1 month. And that takes it away from being sort of tokenistic to actually being sort of a source of genuine change and sort of genuine education. But I agree with everything everyone said.
Thank you all for those wonderful answers. Moving on to our next question, I'd like to open this up to everyone. And the question is, how do you celebrate or honor the month as an individual? And Anita, I'd like to ask if you could answer that question first, because I know in our discussion, you had a very poignant point about the use of the word celebrate.
Thanks, Franklin. I do, and I think I personally struggle with the word celebrate. I want to celebrate the achievements of people who contributed to society, but I struggle with the notion of celebrating Black History Month because I'm Black every day. I don't wake up a different color tomorrow. So, and one of the things I see with the notion of celebration is it creates this notion of novelty. It's something that you do for a period of time and you move away from. So from my perspective, Black History Month and learning about Black history, reflecting about Black history, educating myself about Black history, teaching Black history is something that I think we should all do and everybody should do every day. We wake up to learn, to grow, to educate ourselves, and that should always include Black history, and actually get to us to a place where it stops being Black history and it starts being British history, which then normalizes the entire process. So I really do, personally, I think I've said to you when we discussed Franklin, I don't celebrate Black History Month as a specific thing. I really do see that as something from my perspective that allows me the time to reflect. But overall, I think Black History Month is something that lives with me every month of the year, January to December.
Would anyone else like to expand on that? Lesa?
Yeah, I'd completely agree with that. I think, we talked about all the firsts that we still celebrate, and can't believe in 2023 we're still talking about all these firsts, and we'd just love to get to a point where, it is normal and we don't even need a Black History Month. That would be the dream, really. But I think for me, my children, and since they've joined school, they've made me probably think about Black History Month in a very different way. The school really does a lot. This year they've done Teach the Teacher, which I thought was really interesting. My daughter is a poet, so every year she writes a poem around Black history, and she shares that. It gets published in a newsletter, and it actually inspires myself and my husband to write as well, and really reflect kind of on the month and what it means to us, and where we are in history, where we feel we are, and how we're progressing as well. I think I also joined a book club a couple of years ago, looking at Black authors. But during the month especially, and I do support Black businesses and things throughout the year, but I do make a concerted effort, I think, during the month to support more Black businesses, share more Black businesses, and just, I guess, refocus, as Charlene was saying earlier. I think that's how I look at the month now, but it's really been because of my children who've really made me think about it a little bit more, and the stuff that they do at school.
And Shar, if you could go next, I know you have a very similar point regarding what you tasked your kids.
Yeah, I guess with the kids, and it's not something that they initially appreciated, but I had them write up a little essay on because this year it's obviously saluting our sisters and celebrating our sisters, so it was specifically Black women. And there's a 6-year-old and an 11-year-old. So the 11-year-old had to write a page about a Black woman from history, and the 6-year-old had to write sort of 3 or 4 lines. And he wrote about Whitney Houston, and she wrote about Simone Biles, which I thought was amazing. They learned loads of new things and they were really excited to present it. And then it gave me the opportunity, sort of in a fun way, to actually speak to them more about Black History Month, about what it means, about why there's a focus on it. And yeah, it's having children. I think I agree with you, Lesa. It does make you think differently about the way that you approach the month, because it's a way to also make them feel empowered and feel represented too, which is why I think that schools should make a stand to actually celebrate it sort of in a good way, so that the Black children that are in their school can feel represented.
I'm happy to jump in, Franklin. Well, as a group, we were chatting the other day and preparing for this, and Anita, as part of that kind of idea around normalising things, talked about Mary Kenner, right? Who I didn't know who that was, right? Yeah, and what Anita was saying was basically about learning and the opportunity to understand things that are not the sort of Rosa Parks and this, that, and the other sort of headlines, yeah. And that story is amazing, yeah. Inventing sanitary towels, yeah. 37 years, I think it is, 36, 37 years, in order to be able to get the patent, yeah. Partly to do with money, but partly to do with essentially the culture being trying to prevent it, yeah. And for me, that's a wonderful example of what what's important about this, it's about understanding sort of things that have essentially been hidden to a large degree, and those contributions, and then you know, the other thing I'd point to is I have an 11-year-old little boy, yeah, and they do Black History Month in his school, and he will come back and tell me stuff, right? And that is so different to 1986 when I was 11 and went to comprehensive school in North Nottinghamshire for the first time, when literally diversity was a non-issue. There was one black child and nobody that was non-white outside of that in 13 years of being in my school, yeah, and this didn't exist. This opportunity to learn and to soak up information that massively enriches our understanding culturally, but also brings to light stories that shouldn't have been hidden anyway, yeah. And so, I mean, literally that conversation the other day was exactly an example of what I get out of it personally, but what I think is so important, basically.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of, I guess, jump in from there as well. And like, I guess when we did have that conversation, and you know, Anita brought up that point at which she raised today about the idea of it being celebratory, it was something that actually really made me think of it from a different perspective, because I'd never thought of it like that. That actually there is no specific celebration within Black History Month. You know, it's something that comes around and then we kind of just think, okay, let's be more reflective. But then I think about, okay, how do I quote unquote celebrate it? And, you know, through our business, we do, especially I've loved the theme this month as well, saluting our sisters. So we've, you know, been kind of posting figures and kind of sharing some of their history and the impact that they've had. And I guess it makes me think, you know, yes, absolutely, it should become something that is so normalized that it shouldn't have to be like celebrate. But then even if it was normalized, wouldn't we want an opportunity to shout about the achievements of these amazing Black people in history? So I think, you know, there's a balance to be had in the idea of that. It's not a celebration, but we should still be celebrating those ancestors that have come before us and have made such an amazing impact. It really should be something that, you know, Black history we're learning throughout the year. It's shared throughout the year. But when this time comes around, it should be about us being able to shout about these people and really kind of uplift them, I think, and hold it up from that perspective. And yeah, we've already touched on it. It gives everybody an opportunity to kind of learn from one another and to educate others that may not know about the massive achievements that, you know, these people have had on our history and as a whole.
And keeping in line with the theme for this month, I'd like to pose this question to the group as well. Do you feel enough of a light is shone on the impact of Black women in Black history?
In unison, no.
It's actually no.
Yeah.
I guess, and sorry, just me jumping in there, but no, and I guess in history in general, women are often sort of at the bottom in terms of recognition. Many times in the past, you know, a man has taken credit for something that a woman's done. And then it's probably sort of twofold now when you're speaking about Black women, because they don't just have gender to be at play there. They also have the disadvantage of being Black, which is why I do love the theme this month, and the fact that a lot of women are being highlighted that previously haven't had an opportunity to shine, because their contribution is so important and it should be highlighted. But historically, it has not been, in my opinion, at all. And the people that have been are the Harriet Tubmans and the Rosa Parkses, as we've spoken about before. There are so many people in more modern history that are modern day that just play such an amazing part in society and have contributed to society that just don't get the light shone on them at all.
And I think that's exactly right. So I think you talked about modern day, and that's even today in our workplaces, we have situations where a Black woman says something or a woman says something and you walk away, or you say something and somebody else pitches this idea and you stop and go, hang on a second, I'm sure that was mine. So I think we could talk about history, and I agree with you all. I think our nervous laughter really, really told told the answer we were all trying to say. So I completely agree. Even today's world, we still live in a world where you sometimes have to fight to make sure that your voice is heard. And I'm always reflective, and I think about Mary Seacole as another very, very good example. When we're talking about antibiotics and lots of other things, nobody really ever talks about Mary Seacole. They talk about Florence Nightingale, and that really shows you the difference with which history approaches the accomplishments of Black people and Black women to others. And I think that's something that's really, really important. So to agree with you and to answer your question, frankly, I think we've still got a long way to go.
I'll jump in the middle, so to speak. Yeah, I'm going to be very, very direct with this. The answer to the question is categorically no, they aren't, and that starts with the fact that categorically that's the case when you just look at women. Full stop. Yeah. So this is about layers of discrimination of different types. Yeah. So you could take that lots further with other, with other groups, right, that also experience sort of discriminations. And if you end up sort of being in multiple categories, it just gets worse and worse and worse. Yeah. So there is a huge distance still to travel. Yeah. And it's that combination of these like discriminatory biases, yeah, is something that we just have to knock down the walls on, frankly. Yeah. And I think that what's important is, as Black History Month this time, is that these things are being, showcased, because as somebody said in the chat, it's about education. Yeah. It starts with education and understanding and awareness, because without that, yeah, you can't change the kind of narrative, and kids in particular is where it should be focused. Not that we miss other groups, everybody should do this, yeah. But if we really want to change it, you change it with a mass. You look at things like environmentalism and how that's changed over time, yeah, and and how long it's taken, yeah. These things are not easy to shift, but without the efforts like to try and do this, yeah, from whatever communities people are from, yeah, to just increase understanding and awareness, yeah, then basically either at best nothing happens, or at worst it goes backwards the other way. So what's crucial is that we actually do stuff, yeah, that we engage, that we highlight these things, yeah. At that point I'll shut up and put my soapbox away.
I think part of the problem, if you look historically, women weren't actually allowed to own anything. So patents and things like that in America, women they weren't allowed. So a lot of inventions and things were put under men's names that they had not much to do with. So I think that's probably one of the starting points for why it's, we don't hear very much about some of the things that women have done historically. I will say though that I think the tide is moving in the right direction. I think, my daughter's answer to this question will probably be very different to what mine is today. She's aware of a lot more of Black history than I ever was. And again, some of the things that they're doing in school, they're asking them, go and find some obscure people and write me an essay about it. Come and teach us about it. So I think I want to say that the tide is moving in the right direction on this.
Yeah, no, just to, I guess, close that out, I pretty much agree with everybody. I don't think enough is done to kind of highlight women, and I think it's reflective of how we see it in society. And I think for me, the biggest shame it really is that often, I guess, the most marginalized voices, which will be the ones that, tick the most boxes when we're talking about intersections, are often the voices that are the most impactful, and somehow they don't get heard. I mean, particularly for me, I'm Black Caribbean, and I always think of my community as being quite matriarchal, and that the women tend to lead things, even though we subscribe to the patriarchy. Somehow our communities are actually quite matriarchal. It was led by my grandmother, and then my mother. They do things, and they're always the one. When we look at even within our own business community, we always have a higher number of women that subscribe to our community. We always see those female figures getting out there leading when it comes to things for change and impact and kind of getting out there protesting in the streets, but somehow those voices, which are so hugely impactful, end up kind of being the ones that are kind of quietened down. So I really, really do love the fact that we've got this theme this year and to celebrate. And I think, you know, part of, you know, we talked about like Mary Seacole versus Florence Nightingale, or, you know, it usually being the Harriet Tubmans or the Rosa Parks. For me, I think the biggest change that I would like to see really as we move forward and we are progressing is actually seeing a lot more of the kind of, the modern and the more British voices be uplifted. Like, I always think that it needs to feel more relevant to us. And I think that's sometimes the biggest trick that Black History Month misses as well, is that it has this disconnect in terms of feeling relevant to what is happening for us here and now. And I think it's because sometimes the spotlight instantly goes to kind of either very historical figures or figures that are not kind of, you know, or American, basically. We talk about loads of Americans all the time. And I think we need to start kind of having more focus on what's happening here and the important female figures here that have shaped our history and our current day.
Absolutely agree with that. This year, my daughter wrote on Diane Abbott. And when I mentioned it, she said, "Who's that?" And I was like, "Oh my God, how do you not know who Diane Abbott is?" But yeah. So that point is very, very valid. Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
There are just so many. Like, it's my friend at the moment, she's been doing Instagram posts so every day, and I'm actually proud of her for doing it every single day. During Black History Month, she's been posting another Black British female who has had a part to play in history, from further back to really up to the time modern day people. And it's been amazing. Some people I hadn't even thought of, really. It's been great.
Did you have another point, Shari?
No, I was just saying that, I mean, I love that. And it's the same with us as well. Like, you know, my personal hero is always Olive Morris. I love shouting about her, but, you know, she's someone that literally came from the same community I did in Brixton. You know, I grew up seeing her name on a building and never really knowing who she was. And so when I learned about her and her amazing history as well, I think that was something that really kind of resonated for me and helped me personally in my journey on life of starting my business and going out there, because I was able to see someone that literally, you know, had come from Jamaica around the same time as my mum, and had made such a massive impact, and was from the community that I was from. So I think there's just so much to be said about just looking closer to home and about those amazing important figures. So it's good to kind of hear like that we are shouting out the Diana Abbotts of the world, and, you know, shouting out like the Black British women that have made so much impact.
I'm literally nodding furiously because same Jamaican parents, Olive Morris on the building, had to do some research.
Thank you for your answers. Now, we've touched upon your personal and individual views on Black History Month. Now, moving towards your professional experiences, I'd like to pose the next question to you all. And that question is, what have companies you've worked for in the past done to honor the month? And I open that up to everyone.
So I can. Oh, you go, Shari.
No. I mean, I would have just said, I guess, very little. It would always kind of be what had happened in my previous companies when I was like in corporate. You know, we might get like one evening where they would, you know, invite everyone down. We might have a keynote speaker, and you know, they would serve some quote unquote traditional food, you know. Again, we talked about this in our kind of previous meeting, you know. It is the time when like the patty canapes and the jerk chicken kind of gets rolled out, and you have one speaker, and it's usually someone that, you know, has been given no budget, which is another thing we talked about, and they are expected to kind of put on. And I always think the major issue is that a lot of the times these corporates kind of look to their staff who may not even be in a diversity role, but are just kind of the Black person in the office, and say, okay, what should we do for Black History Month? And really have no kind of understanding of what they're trying to achieve here, apart from just kind of, yeah, showing up and kind of doing a tick box token exercise that, you know, people can say, oh, we've done something for Black History Month. So in my corporate companies that I've been in, I would say it's always been very little. And I think there's way more of a shift to happen with those companies in terms of how they start looking at Black History Month going forward and what they can do. And I think it does start with kind of looking deeper into their own kind of creation and history and how that ties in significantly into Black history. And then I think about thinking about really the legacy that they're trying to leave and the work environment that they're trying to create. And I think if we look back, then you can look forward, right? You have to look back, really understand what your kind of company is formed of, what the work environment is formed of, and then how we can progress that. And I think there's amazing ways to tie things in through Black History Month that will feel impactful and long lasting, other than kind of just inviting everyone to hear one speaker and eat some, traditional food.
It's funny. It's crazy how embarrassing it is as we talk about it now. And we've all worked in a company where there is I think we use the example, there's the jerk chicken in the canteen, and you can see somebody giving themselves a pat on the back because they think they've done a good job. And most Black people there are cringing at the thought of this badly cooked chicken that is being served and is being portrayed as, yes, this is our respect to the Black community. And you're right. I think there is a lot more that still needs to be done in companies. There is a lot more that companies can and should be thinking about. You touched on most of those things, Shari. It's really about taking the time to think about these things. We know that these are days that they come around like birthdays and anniversaries and everything. It's the same time every year. Think about it when you're doing your business planning, etc. It's those kind of things. One of the things I will say that I've seen that's been done really well, and I think I've touched on this, is reverse mentoring. Because we've talked about education being a key part to this. And there's education at different levels. There's education in the schools, which is a slightly different, that's a beast in its own. And we can talk about the frameworks and how we fix the education system to normalize the history. But also there's education where actually there are lots of people who want to learn, but maybe don't necessarily know how or what to read, what's right versus where to go for different kinds of information. One of the things I've seen done really well is reverse mentoring. So where you have younger or more junior Black people within an organization teaching and educating more senior people, usually quite senior white men within an organization, or white women as well. And one of the things that's helped to do is to really shine a light and really give the ability to amplify our voices. So you have the junior person who's able to say, actually, there's this really interesting book that I'm going to recommend that you go and read. And that starts to open up the discourse in a really different way, because once people understand things, they're able to help you pass on the message and teach and carry on propagating that message more widely. So that's one of the things I've certainly seen that's been done really well. But I go back to it. I think the core of this, and I think Nick touched on it, and I think you all know how I feel about this, is really education. There is a real role for everybody to educate themselves and have a personal responsibility to educate themselves for us to be better at this.
I don't know if people realise, but I'm white and definitely not a woman. And but I could not agree more. And for me personally, whilst not a formal reverse mentoring program, that experience and lived experience and understanding it through various different people who I won't name them, that's not probably right, but that's been a massively important part of how well, in one sense why I'm here now, I guess, because of and how important this is, and how you in understanding stuff that you can't understand just from your own perspective without doing that, that you need in order to make the right decisions when you're managing a set of people, and I guess coming then to your question, Franklin, if I reframe that the other way around and say, what shouldn't people, companies and corporates do? I think my answer to you the other day was token fucking bollocks, yeah, because that is what there's too much of, yeah. The jerk chicken example, what that does is teaches people what really bad jerk chicken probably tastes like, yeah, and that's probably about it, yeah. It's actually, as Anita was saying, it's about actually putting some thought into it, yeah, and going, what do we want to get out of this thing, yeah, right? And it's got to be authentic and relevant and engaging as well, yeah. What's the point of doing things which are done in a way that is boring? Because I'm sure we all, you know, like if somebody puts you in a room to listen to something and you're bored to death, you get nothing out of it other than a rejection of what it is usually. So it's actually about putting thought into it, and then not senior folk from a company. They're our jobs, you know, in my case, that it's to enable these things, yeah. And it's about building something which is also connected to what people in that organization like either want or need to understand, yeah. So much of our jobs as researchers is actually about understanding the cultural environment within whatever audience that we are, you know, talking about, yeah. Their reactions to certain things are, yeah. Now, if you basically don't understand a massive part of that cultural environment, especially say if you're doing something in London, it's like 41%, I think, is non-white as a base, or non-British non-white. It's like, you know, it's you can't get things right if you don't understand this, yeah. And you can't genericize. So building sort of tools or sort of mechanisms, you know, and using Black History Month as a time to focus on that, yeah, to actually enhance like cultural understanding. To be honest with you, that's an absolutely brilliant thing to do for a business commercially, right? Yeah, I mean, one of the things that if you look at, there's some McKinsey research, right, that basically what you get is people go, if I concentrate on all of this stuff, right, diversity, you know, DEI, whatever, right, it'll cost us loads of money, right? So we're not going to do that or anything. If you look at what McKinsey then say about the highest growth businesses are the ones that are most diverse, yeah, that have actually invested in actually enabling that the people that work for them to understand about the importance of cultural diversity and to take that into account when they're thinking about what they're doing in whatever project work they're doing. Because that's how you get it wrong, by thinking about some generic one answer and not taking account of, you know, the cultural diversity that will exist, and it will be differently relevant for different things, yeah. I mean, it's such a nonsense that it's often seen as a token thing that we must do, and it's not thought about. If you actually think about it, yeah, properly, it's actually way better for your bloody business as well, yeah. So it's so bonkers that people don't actually do it properly, that it actually annoys me, as you can probably tell. But I think this is part of that, you know, learning that has got to happen, and it's about making people's ears be open and not shut, yeah. And unfortunately, what that means is because of the biases that exist, yeah, there are more people that are not female, that are not, you know, well, that are white, essentially, in those positions. So how do you change that, yeah? And basically, that has to start with actually knocking down some walls, basically, and making a noise about it, yeah? Because without that, it's not going to be done within corporates in a way that is authentic and relevant and useful, yeah. And I think doing something that's tokenistic, yeah, is actually going to massively drive your workforce away from you, because they can spot that a mile away. So
I was going to say, to expand on that, Nick's already dived into that next question I was going to ask, and that is, what do you think companies should do? What can companies avoid when it comes to Black History Month? You know, so when it comes to tokenism, when it comes to those generic LinkedIn posts that I'm sure everyone's seen, what would you say people should avoid?
So, I mean, I've had past experiences where there's been a Spotify playlist of Black artists, and that's all that's been done for the month. So probably avoid something like that. Also, one thing I think that companies should avoid is, once again, something I experienced where nothing was really done for Black History Month. And I did raise it, and the sort of response was that, you know, oh, well, what do you think we should do? And it's just, although, okay, I am quite an outspoken person generally, and I don't mind giving my opinion, but not everybody is like that. So the onus should not be placed on the Black person in the organisation to come up with it, because not everybody is comfortable to. If they are, that's amazing. Then you'll be able to get great input from them. But the expectation should never just automatically be there. Literally, Google is free, and just by putting in some keywords into Google, the same way we've all learned how to use ChatGPT and do great prompts, you can get some good information out of it, right? So there's organizations like the Unmistakable, who are doing great work. They're an agency, and they do sort of data and insight and learning and strategic advisory work around diversity and inclusion. And they actually have a guide on the do's and don'ts of Black History Month, sort of 8 different lessons, so you can sort of see it on their website. And a couple of the points that I won't go through all of them, but a couple of the points that they've made are to think about Black people beyond October. So similarly to what I said earlier about using it as an opportunity to sort of pivot and to think about what you're doing for the year going forward, and to prioritize internal change over external comms. And for me, I think that was great. It's all good and well doing great campaigns and speaking about supporting Black people and celebrating sisters, but then when you look at the disparity that exists within your actual organisation, are you actually walking the walk or are you just therefore being tokenistic? So yeah, I think everybody should go look at the Unmistakable's website. They're not sponsoring me, but the points that they make are really, really amazing. And it's, people always say that they want a guide, they don't know where to start. Starting in places like that can help.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Charlene. I think tokenism annoys everyone. I'd say the company I work for, I can say that they take it very seriously. They take inclusion as a whole very seriously, and it creates spaces outside of the month that we can talk about our feelings. I remember when the report on the Commission of Race came out, they put in some sessions in to sort of talk about how we were feeling, which is not often something that anyone cares about during that time. So I think avoiding tokenism. I also think, so we've had some really good Black History Month celebrations. A couple of years ago, I was in charge of sort of organising what it was going to be about, and I really did focus on that celebration aspect and really trying to embed culture into everything, but also raise awareness of the fact that there was still Black people who are scared to bring their full selves to work. And there's, we highlighted some people within the business and really got them to be quite honest about, how they were feeling about things. And in some cases, we've sort of asked, can we use this on LinkedIn? And I was like, no. So allow the celebrations and the honesty and everything that's been expressed to be what they are. It's not a marketing tool. It's not a recruitment tool. It's a conversation that's being had to move the company forward. And I think as good as I would say that my company is on the inclusion space, there's still some of those sort of things that kind of crop up. Can we use this as marketing? No, you can't. So I think it's just showing that you're taking it seriously outside of October. I think that would be my number one thing.
And finding budget. Because it's often, oh no, we haven't got the budget for that. We haven't got a Black History Month budget, but you have budget for Friday drinks. Is this really important to you? If it is, then put some money behind it. Don't expect Black people to come and work for free.
I had to get very creative, Charlene.
I can imagine.
Instead of bringing in food, we got people to cook their food at home and take pictures. We shared recipes of jollof rice. That was interesting. I
won't start that debate about the jollof either, but
no.
Yeah.
We're now at 12:50, which is when we were going to move to the Q&A portion. but I'm not actually seeing any questions in the Q&A chat. And if that's the case, I do have two more questions we could go through, unless anyone does have any questions that they would like us to discuss.
I think I saw one question in the actual chat from, I don't know if it was a question or just a thought, but from Melvin, where he said, how do we execute without being that individual? Always a risk of tokenism in large corps, but I guess that's something we've sort of spoken about and given information on how to do that. So hopefully we answered that question for you, Melvin.
I can see a raised hand from Michelle. Michelle, do you have a question?
Rohan.
If perhaps not, the question I would like to pose is, what is the research industry doing currently that is positive? And Nick, I know you've worked quite closely with the MRS, so I'm wondering if you could start us off.
Yeah, so Debbie, I mean, I guess I'd frame it by saying there is always way more that could be done. Yeah. And one of the challenges the MRS as an organisation has is that like a lot of it's done from people, me included, on borrowed time. So it all happens way slower than you'd wish it to. But under the kind of Jane Frost sort of era, if you want to call it that, she has absolutely driven a DEI kind of focus for MRS as being one of the, well, probably the most important agenda. And what Jane would also say is far too late and not been as, not made it as much impact as we would have wanted to, but at least something's happening. Now, there are lots of industries where there is nothing, yeah? And what I would say more than anything is that what's required to drive things more is people like the core group and the bigger group around just the management team, as it were, in core, that are actually doing stuff, yeah? But it's also it's not just about people from certain communities, it's about the people who need to have their ears open doing shit too, yeah? And basically driving that agenda, yeah, which is for me super, super important. So it's about efforts, because without people that are willing to give time to do stuff, then things don't move quickly enough. But what I would say is the industry has, in the last probably 5 years, done so much more than it ever did before, when bluntly what it did before that was, I think, probably classified as fuck all. And the fact that we've actually got this happening now is a massive step. I go back to what Jane said, too late, not enough impact, but we are moving things, yeah? So the more people that can get involved in trying to help with do things, right? Because we have to, we can't expect other people to change the industry. We have to do this ourselves. But at least we've got a set of people in various different places that are well up for that challenge, yeah? And the more support that we give those people, the better, yeah? Because we're better off than other places where there's literally nothing.
So, Nick, I agree with you, but I'd also like to challenge a bit on that. And the reason I say that is I'd like to see the MRS put some onus on company partners to do more. I nearly die a little on the inside every time I see a screener recruiting in London and calls Black people hard to reach. Because I stop and go, oh my God, we have phones. We're no longer, I'm here. You don't need to look for me in the little hole somewhere. There are enough Black people in London for us to not see screeners.
I could not agree more.
So I want to see the onus, I want to see the MRS say to company partners, if you want to retain this company partner status, what we want to see you doing more of is this. And the reason I say that is research is so important. We help companies design products and services and processes that will work in the future. And if we don't get that right, we will produce processes and services that don't actually work for Black people. So I think you're absolutely right that more has been done, certainly in the last, I've noticed more in the last three to 4 years, but the hill we still need to climb, and I want to see the MRS climb is still very steep.
100%, totally agree. It's massive, to be honest with you, yeah? And it's not hard to reach. It's haven't bothered to try most of the time, yeah? And there's a lot of work that MRS have done around representativity, which is actually about exactly bringing this to the fore. You know, there's people like Kelly-Metelewa who have actually been very, very vocal on pushing this as an agenda and a message. And I think that there are people that are learning from that. But what's actually then required is people to actually adopt these things that are there as guidance, right, from the MRS. Because when you're doing a rep sample, yeah, as a researcher, you have to make it fucking rep, yeah? So what is that? Now, rep is not 3 geographic areas, north, south, you know, middle bit, yeah? And the middle bit includes what essentially was a different country called Wales, yeah? And the north bit includes a different country called Scotland, yeah? I mean, and that, you know, when that goes down through to sort of other demographic criteria, yeah? It's about making sure that we, as researchers, actually represent that requirement for more genuine representativity, yeah? So that for me is something that says, nobody can say there's nothing I can do, yeah? And it's literally that. So, you know, I completely agree with what you're saying there, Leigh, yeah? 100%. At least what we have got now from the industry body is some stuff that's coming through, framework, guidance. This is what you should look at. When you say rep, you need to say what you mean by rep, yeah? So there's a headline sort of narrative there that's coming from industry, but really the success is us as researchers doing it right and doing it better. And everybody can have a role in that.
And I can see we do have 2 questions in the QA section. I'll start with the first one from Ozada. Their question is, one of the common things that I'm seeing is that organizations treat Black employees as a single group. How to take intersectionality into account when celebrating Black History Month? Would anyone like to answer this?
Well, I mean, I guess to me, it's about that representation of intersectional figures within Black history. I guess we've touched on it when we talked about women being represented this year and kind of trying to amplify those voices. But then there are also obviously other subsections and intersections within that as well that happen. And I think there absolutely needs to be more. I think from a company's perspective, again, you know, if they have overall kind of D&I goals that they've been set out for the year, how does that play into it? When it comes to Black History Month, I don't think it has to be, you know, everything else stops or all our agenda stops or everything we were trying to work for from our impact statement stops. But really, how does this intertwine when it comes to Black history? And as again, I keep saying, Black history crosses over into every facet, particularly of British life. Like, it's so integral to the development of this country. British history itself is literally so intertwined with Black history. So there are so many different ways that also plays into the intersections of people, because we're not a kind of a monolith group. Obviously, we know this. We know Black people exist in every facet, in every way, have different perspectives and viewpoints. And I think it's about, you know, those companies basically looking at what are their goals overall and saying, then how can we amplify those voices that may be Black, but also kind of fit in with other areas that we want to kind of amplify, and then kind of doing that. But then also, I think, you know, going out there and doing the research to find those voices and make sure that, you know, when we are talking about representation, we're creating a safe space. So I loved what Lesa said about kind of the events that she had and basically not making it public, because you need to be able to have a safe space for people to also feel confident and secure in being able to share those different kind of viewpoints as well safely. And I think that goes for those wider corporations, and it also goes for us as well, as amongst as a people, of being able to allow everybody to share different perspectives and the feelings and opinions too, and feel like they can do that safely.
And we are now just shy of the end. It's almost 2 p.m. I don't know if any of our speakers would like to also have like a closing remark.
Massive thank you to everybody, both on the panel and that's turned up to listen to this, and the comments in the chat. It's really massively appreciated. Thank you from me.
Thanks to everyone.
I'll go on, sorry, Anita.
Oh no, I was just going to say thanks to everyone for joining. I think it's been really, really insightful, and I think my reflections are, if you give it time, you invest in it and you're authentic about it, it goes a long way. It really, really does. That really cuts through most of the things that we've talked about today. So I think that has to be the approach. It can't be the thing you think about on the 25th of September. It really needs to be when you're doing your business planning, when you're thinking about your overall business strategy.
And I just have to say from my side, I think it's actually a shame that it's only just an hour. There's just so much passion. It's been such a pleasure getting to know all of you. This could have been a podcast which would have lasted even longer, which would have been even better. But thank you. And like Sia's saying, maybe part 2, why not? But thank you everyone for joining, and thank you to our panelists for also joining. And Shah, I think you also had a closing remark. I saw you.
No, I was just going to say, no, I was saying the same. And I'm not making it the end of the month, not making it the start of the month, because I'm not really seeing much around about Black History Month anymore at the moment, which is why we had chosen to do it at the end of the month, because by now it's been forgotten. People have hit their quotas and they're not interested anymore. So yeah, continuing to do the learning, continuing to do the work, and actually not being lazy and looking into it, finding budgets and supporting your Black employees.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'll just say as well, just a huge thank you. The comments have been really interesting. I've been kind of semi-distracted reading some of those as well. So it's been great to see kind of all the engagement in the chat. And yeah, just to echo it, I love that this is how we're kind of closing out the month, but remember, we Black every month. So, you know, keep learning, keep sharing. And also we challenge all other people from other communities to do the same, to keep challenging, keep learning, keep going out there and kind of building a better understanding, because it has such a massive impact on us all and on our lives today as a whole. So thanks so much for this. It's been great.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the rest of your week, and watch this space. We'll have more webinars like this for you. And if we weren't able to answer all of your questions, don't worry. I will take a screenshot and we can follow up with you. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm going to end. So this will end now. Bye, everyone.